Very excited. We're joined with Dani Sinclair today. Thanks for joining us, Dani.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So, where did you grow up, and when did basketball start making a start in your life? When did you get going with it?
I grew up. I was born in Saskatchewan, but we got out of there pretty quickly and moved to Ontario. I grew up in Guelph, Ontario, and I didn't come from a family background that was heavily into sports, but I think that community, I grew up around it. There's a lot of sports in that community, and we had a University of Guelph basketball player move into our basement. We rented out our basement, and she moved in there, and she was her name was Carleton, and she was the reason I got into basketball. She offered to coach our grade 8 basketball team. Back then, you didn't start basketball till grade 8.
Okay.
That's when I first touched the ball. So she was our grade 8 basketball coach, and that's kind of how I fell in love. And I realized just how close I was. My mom still lives, and our family home is directly across from the University of Guelph. So it was about a 3-minute walk to the basketball gym there. So I ended up from that point on, every Wednesday and Saturday would just live in the gym watching the University of Guelph games. And so I really, and I say this to athletes all the time, like, I think I learned so much about the game just watching. Like the men's team in particular at that time at U of D was really strong, and I picked up a lot of things just observing, even before I was really into playing. And then from then on, just I started playing club basketball and stayed in Ontario. Started out at McMaster University, played there for 3 years after going through the provincial program out in Ontario, and then ended up out west, and that's kind of a story in itself.
Well, give us the abbreviated version. So how do you end up? So McMaster's obviously a very good school, and then you end up going to UVic. I mean, very few places in Canada are further apart. So how does that happen?
Well, I mean, at the time, I loved my experience at McMaster, but for, there was a number of reasons that I wanted to make a change, some of them personal, and at the time, UVic was the place to be in basketball and women's basketball, and BC. It was UVic, Simon Fraser, UBC, and I had an opportunity to meet some of the UVic players at I went to a tryout for the student national team. I didn't make the team, but I got to know some of the athletes here, and that helped form my decision to come out. And I remember the year I arrived and the year I redshirted, we didn't make playoffs, and it was the year that Kathy Shields, she had to take a leave because she had become ill. And so the program was in a little bit of turmoil, and I was kind of having some second thoughts, but I just really I fell in love with the program, and had already made some pretty strong relationships with the players there. And as growing up in Southern Ontario and then arriving on campus with bunnies running around everywhere and the ocean all around you, I kind of fell in love with that too. So
Never showed up.
yeah. I mean, it did take a while to get used to the rain, but now, I've been here now for 20 years, and I'm a little bit terrified of going to experience an Ottawa winter, but we'll adjust. So we ended up the following year, my 4th year of eligibility, the first year I played here at UVic, we in such a strong league, like every weekend I looked at the schedule, you got Simon Fraser 4 times, UBC 4 times, and then you're playing the strong teams out of the prairies. I understood how in the Canada West at that time, you by the time you hit playoffs, you were so battle ready, and we were able to squeeze our way into nationals, and we were lucky enough to be on the opposite side of the draw from Simon Fraser, who was number 1 in the country at that time. And they were upset in the semifinal by Winnipeg. So, you know, the stars aligned a little bit for us. And we were able to beat Winnipeg in the final to win a national championship. And it was kind of neat because nationals that year were actually at McMaster. So I was able to do it on my old,
that's cool.
my old home court in my new gear with UVic. So that, I mean, it was a surreal experience, and, you know, something that we still to this day, I'm still really close with a lot of my teammates, and we can't believe that it happened. You know, we went from not making playoffs to winning a national championship. And so they're just really cool.
That's unreal. I mean, what a cool way to get it too, like at your old school. Like that would be, I'd be walking around saying hi to everybody. Hi, nice to see you again. How you doing?
Yeah, we had a pretty good party in Hamilton that night too with some old friends.
Oh, for sure. So you finished playing. What'd you graduate with?
I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts. I knew all along that I wanted to teach. And in Ontario back then, even now, it's you just get your degree and then you go to teacher's college. So I kind of took that route. And I was planning to go to teacher's college, but then it was the year I graduated. It was probably a month after we were done, and I was kind of trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I was walking down the street, and a van pulls up beside me, and it's Ian Hidlay. So for anyone who doesn't know Ian, he was a longtime coach, still coaches at St. Michael's University School. He was Steve Nash's high school coach, and he was the athletic director at the time at the school. And he rolled up, pulled down his window, and said, "Hey, do you want a job?" So I didn't really know what it entailed when I said yes, but I knew I needed a job. So I spent 5 years. You know, I worked with everywhere from grade 4 to grade 12, and it wasn't specifically basketball, but we called it sports club, and it was after school program where I worked with all different age groups for 4 to 6 hours a day. Just basically, it was an after school gym class and that I got to run, and it was neat because not only did it prepare me for eventually going to teacher's college at UVic, but it also helped to formulate some of my coaching. You know, I had walked into, so Brian Chang was my coach at UVic when I played, and I had walked into his office and said, "Okay, I'm done now. Could I be your assistant coach?" And he said no, because you know, I think he knew I was still too close to the players. They were my teammates and friends. So he said, "If you want to coach, you got to go figure out how to coach." And so that the combination of that message from Brian and then the opportunity that Ian afforded me, I worked at SMU for 5 years and just coached a whole bunch of different sports. And then, you know, I also ran the night league basketball program. So I was coaching, you know, I would coach 4 to 5 different night league basketball teams. And so I think that was really important for, you know, my growth as a coach. I learned at the younger level, as opposed to just jumping right in as an assistant coach at the U Sport level.
I think that's a huge benefit, to be honest with you. Like, just from seeing people coach, like, after they play, it's like, if you need reps, man. Like, you don't want to be learning on the job. Like, you know, I've seen a few university coaches that got the job without actually ever coaching before, and it's like they're making the mistakes that we make in high school, you know, when we started. And it's like, you could have done that. So getting to do those things probably made a huge impact on your career, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and you know, I then after 5 years, I did my PDP. It was 8 months. It was 8 months at that time. It's now 18 months. But it was that year that I was able to then get on as an assistant coach at UVic, and like that teaching, I just see teaching and coaching as going hand in hand, and you know, I approach my job in that way, like very, very much. Like I think my time as a teacher really helped my time as a coach at the university level, because so much of what we're working with student athletes. And as much as basketball is a huge part of it, there's so many other aspects to our jobs. And, you know, yeah, that experience was invaluable. And then, yeah, on the court, you know, coaching at U Sport level, you know, whether, you know, you could argue that it's not high stakes, you know, and I was pretty well protected at UVic. I wasn't afraid of being fired, but you put a lot of pressure on yourself to succeed. And you're right, you don't want to be walking in there taking on a head coaching position without some experience.
Well, I mean, it's also like if you're a winner and you like winning, then it's always high stakes, right? Like, so the pressure's always there. It's just internal instead of external, right? So, and I know you're pretty
Yeah,
good.
exactly.
I have a feeling you took it pretty seriously.
Yeah.
So you're assistant coach. How's that go? And then what happens after that?
So I guess it was a bit of a blessing, because there was some early on in being an assistant coach, there were some jobs that were coming up, head coaching jobs that I maybe otherwise would have applied for. I think particularly right now, if you're a young female in coaching, like schools want to hire women right now. And back then, this was 15 years ago, there was, you know, the University of Guelph job came up, and I thought about applying, but my life circumstances didn't really allow it. I was starting to have a family, and there were I thought when I started to have a family that maybe I wouldn't be able to coach, but thankfully I had some good people around that, you know, Brian Chang being one of them, that was very supportive, and Rich Chambers another. I was an assistant with both of those two while having kids, and they were really understanding. I mean, you know what that's like now. I was dragging babies around the country, and so it was, you know, again, I had my time to develop coaching at, you know, grade 4 to 12, and then I was an assistant for 7 years, and I didn't pursue a head coaching position because I was having a family right away. And I think that again, that time as an assistant was hugely valuable and helped to prepare me. I think once you make that jump to being a head coach, you're never truly ready. You kind of just have to dive in. But that time was huge. And I worked for the other person I worked for was Anna Stamberger at Dalhousie. I was in Halifax for a year. So I had three mentors in Rich Chambers, Brian Chang, and Anna, and they were all very different in how they approached my job as an assistant. You know, Rich being, you know, the most forward thinking, and I think he knew he was kind of, he would say to me on a daily basis, okay, if you want to be a head coach, you got to learn how to do this. And he would give me responsibilities that I hadn't had before in an effort to prepare me. And, you know, and then I have to mention also, like, I continue to have, you know, from the time I was a player and throughout my coaching career, I've been lucky enough to, since I've moved to Victoria, to have Kathy Shields as a mentor as well. So that's, to me, I think that's been a huge part of my development and growth, and continues to be that I think you need strong mentorship in this job and in a lot of jobs to be successful.
Totally. So let's just key in on those two guys real quick. So Brian Chang and Rich Chambers, obviously very technically solid coaches at the highest level. Talk about the difference in comparison between the two of those guys.
Yeah, I think, you know, Rich is indescribable. As anyone who's spent time around him, his energy is just, you know, he was, I'm not going to give away his age, but he was here, you know, he probably could have been close to retirement when he started his job here at UVic. And like, he literally didn't sleep. Like he would call me from the office I remember actually, I said to myself, okay, I'm going to try to be the good assistant and beat him to the office in the morning. So I remember the first day I got up, showed up at 7:30, and he'd already been there. So, you know, through the whole, every day of that week, I tried to go earlier and earlier. And then I finally asked, like, what time do you show up? He said, about 5. He would show up at the office, and then he would stay there all day long. He would call me. We would practice in the evenings, and then he would call me at 9 or 10 p.m. And, you know, I think the way he works is you almost, as an example, because I think many people, and I can't live up to that, but what I learned from him is just, you know, he taught me so much, like one of them being, you know, you got to work at it, but you got to truly love it. And he absolutely loves, you know, part of why he was able to do that was because he was here away from his family. You know, but he truly loved every second of what he did. And he gave so athletes in the school and worked so hard. And you know, one of the messages I remember from him is he said, be yourself, you know, because, you know, I'm a pretty fiery coach. And I think I spent a lot of my early years trying to change that. And he would say, you can't, whether you're a player or coach, you've got to play your strengths, and you can't try to be somebody you're not. And that really helped. That messaging really helped in terms of my development. And then Brian, and Rich was very open, as I mentioned, in terms of giving me responsibilities. Brian, it was different. He was a little more closely guarded with his stuff. Like I didn't have responsibility in terms of making decisions. But you know, he taught me work ethic. He's somebody that didn't play the game himself at a high level, but he just worked, you know. And if it's too long of a story to get into right now in terms of how he got into coaching, but it was just pure work ethic, and he also was such a genuine person. And I think that's something maybe people don't know about him. He was just at the end of the day, yes, you want to win games and be successful, but you got to be a good person too.
Absolutely. So there's you know, these kind of stories people tell, and you know, of how you would have a baby and then you would go coach like the next day. And I find those to be spectacular stories, in my opinion. So like, nobody's allowed to talk bad about Dani Sinclair. When I found out you flew to, was it Saskatchewan, had a baby, and then coached right away? Is that what happened?
Kind of. And you appreciate that as a person. So it was actually Edmonton, which wasn't as far. You know, it's only the flight's only an hour, and I don't know. It was playoffs, and if it had been my first child, I wouldn't have done it, obviously. And my husband at the time, he came with me, so he traveled with me. That was part of the agreement. Like, okay, you can do this as long as I come. And you know, I wasn't due yet, so I didn't think I would. You know, obviously that wasn't the plan to have the baby there. But then once, you know, we arrived on a Thursday night, and then the baby Ben, he was born 5 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, and we had a playoff game that night. So when he was born, I texted our staff. I said, I'm not going to be there tonight. Like, I'm in the hospital. I had the baby. But then I had this incredible doctor who, you know, everyone was asking me why I was there because I had BC ID. And so I was telling all the nurses and doctors, I was telling them my story. And the one doctor said, we got to get you out of here. You got a game to go to. So as soon as the competitive part of me, as soon as he gave me the okay and said that, I had to, we worked together to make it happen. So once, you know now all the checks that they have to do on the baby before you're allowed to leave the hospital. So by about noon, Ben checked out, I checked out. And I remember saying, Leanne Evans was my assistant, and I said to her, okay, I'm going to come to the game and sit on the bench, but I'm not going to say much. Like, you take over tonight. And about 2 minutes in, I couldn't help myself.
I mean, I just love that story. I mean, I like, and I'll tell you why I love it, because I think, you know, as a society, we don't allow people to figure it out. And the reality is, you know, you can have a baby and you can coach basketball, in my opinion. There's going to be a bunch of people disagree with me, but I think you can have a baby and you can coach basketball. Like, as somebody who's always looking for coaches in our program, and as somebody who's been coaching for, you know, a little bit of time now, I see a lot of people. I'm like, oh, what happened? How come you're not coaching? And they're like, oh, I had a baby, and it just, you know, then I couldn't go to the gym. And it's like, why can't the baby come to the gym? Why can't you take the baby to the gym? I mean, I remember, maybe it was because when I was growing up, I had a high school coach, and his sons were just wandering around the court the whole time. And if they caused trouble, he put the soccer net around them. Like, it was literally, like, it was easy. And I was just, you know, I think it's an important lesson, because I think when one of the biggest things kids need to see is that you're in it, that you're all the way in, right? As a coach, they want to know that you are all the way in. And there literally is there's not a bigger move than freaking having a baby and then going and coaching a game. Like, nobody's questioning your commitment from that group for the rest of your life, like, ever. It's not happening. And they're probably telling people about you. And I bet you what, I'll tell you this, you probably changed their life, because they'll probably think about having babies a little differently after seeing that. You know what I mean? Like, I bet you it'll be in their head when they have a kid. You'll probably get a phone call from all of them. And they're going to be like, how the hell did you do that? I'm stuck here. I'm not going anywhere. And you're going to be like, oh, it was a playoff game, I guess. So,
well, I do have to say that I don't want to set a precedent that there's an expectation that you're able to walk out of the hospital within a few hours. But most definitely, it's, you know, I actually thought I got away from that story moving to Carleton. And one of the first things someone said to me, like, hey, you're the woman that had the baby and then coach, right? And it's so funny to hear the twisted versions of that story. Like, some of the story, like that I had the baby on the bench. Yeah.
I'll bet you this. It'll get you some street cred over there, though. It'll get you some street. They take it seriously over at Carleton. That story probably is why you got the job. To be honest with you, that's a big deal. So now let's talk about that. So you got the job at Carleton. I actually spent. My brother lived in Ottawa for 20 years, and we used to go all over the world for vacations with family, and then it switched to Ottawa every day. Every year it just switched to Ottawa all of a sudden. So tell me what drew you there. Obviously you have family over there, and then talk about, you know, you're walking into a pretty decent team, but a basketball school for sure. Talk about what it's like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was an interesting circumstance. I never really planning on leaving UVic. Like, UVic is, I'm an alum of the program. You know, I came out here because I idolized UVic, and I can't say enough good things about the program. And I'm so excited for Shay Deanshaw, who was my assistant for a couple of years, who's taking it over. She's going to be absolutely fabulous. You know, but my heart will always be in Victoria and at UVic. But, you know, some personal circumstances, you know, led to me wanting to be closer to family. Yeah. You know, I have 3 boys, and my family's in Guelph still, which is it's close, but still far enough away that, you know, I can see them. You know, so that truly was a primary part of the move, but that the personal circumstance coincided with a phone call from Dave Smart and Taffy Charles. Taffy Charles was previously the head coach of the women's team at Carleton, and he moved over to the men's side. And Dave's in a unique position. He retired from coaching, but he's now the general manager of both teams. So there's no other school in Canada that has a general manager, let alone that person being Dave Smart. So, you know, I from a professional standpoint, it just, you know, decisions in my life, I'm not a very logical person sometimes, but I make decisions based on instinct and feel, and everything made sense. And again, the final decision was a personal one, but it just happened to, I happened to have the opportunity to have an amazing job opportunity that came with it. So yeah, it was finalized, after our season was finished this year at UVic, and in a very Dave Smart fashion, I've just been thrown, even though things are shut down and we can't be training, like I was thrown right into it right away. And I, even in the last 3 months, have just learned so much from being around him. Like we talk every day, and we have meetings almost every day. And like I don't even know if he realizes. It's kind of like being around Kathy. Like I talk to Kathy almost every day, and they say things without even realizing that are so profound in terms of whether it be technical or relationship stuff or team dynamic stuff. So I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, things have been thrown into a bit of a loop with what's going on in the world, but I mean, I'm really looking forward to. I've gotten to know the girls, the current players, a little bit over Zoom calls and that type of thing. And it's a good challenge. It's terrifying in some respects, but it's also really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. So, with kids, you always talk about, all the positive stuff, but, and I want to dive into an opportunity to try to overcome some adversity and then how it worked out. So let's get an adversity story in here.
Nice. Okay. Well, I mean, I just generally, or just what's going on currently?
No, let's go coaching. So like in your coaching career, talk about, or playing career, to be honest.
Yeah.
Where, something didn't go the way you wanted it to go, and then you had to overcome the obstacle to get to where you were today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I think I'm a bit of a junkie when it comes to that type of thing. Like I almost thrive better. I think a lot of us competitive people and coaches and high level athletes, like we almost seek out adversity in a way, like because otherwise it's a bit boring. I think that's problem solving on your feet is part of the job as a coach. Like that's almost more important than any technical aspect of the job. So I think I can think of a lot of things. It's hard to really pinpoint one, but I'll go back to trying to manage being a full-time mom and managing the day-to-day stuff. Like, so when I say I'm a junkie, that night I coached after having a baby, it was actually pretty easy because there's so much adrenaline. What I found and what I still find more difficult is the day-to-day management of, making sure my 3 kids are fed and clothed and get to school on time, get to their own activities, while also managing work. And I think that's something that most people can latch onto and that they experience, right? We all have so many things to balance in life. And I think I've actually, over the last couple of years, as I've mentioned, I can be a pretty fiery coach and sometimes let my emotions get to me and take control of me too much. And the way I've approached, that, and I see it all interconnected, how my own demeanor, managing all those things in my life. I never thought I would come to this, but I've tried to take a more meditative approach to life and be calming down a little bit more. So that's a bit broad in terms of how I handle that stuff, but still the struggle I still have is that I want to be calmer and more meditative and not freak out so much. But then the worry is that you lose your edge. So I'm trying to figure out and find the balance of that.
Well, then it goes back to what you said earlier. You got to be who you are, right? So, I mean, if it is who you are, then you got to just roll with it, kind of deal.
Yeah.
Let's go with last thing. If you were to go back in time at any point in time, what advice would you give young Dani Sinclair that would maybe change some of the things that happened in your life?
Yeah, I think I was obsessive about basketball, and and didn't probably pay enough attention to other aspects of just enjoying being a young adult, being a teenager. So sort of that wellness aspect of life. Like, I was a happy person, but I let other things slide. And I think the advice I would give was to sort of, I'd go back, and people have probably heard this before, but I'd go back and give, 20-year-old Dani a big hug and say, it's okay, like, relax. Just life's going to turn out. And I would completely, and I would just shut down after a loss. Life was over. Nothing mattered. Like when I was playing at the university level for a whole day. Like, I couldn't do schoolwork. I couldn't talk to anybody. And so now, and early on when I started coaching, it was the same. Like, because we would play Friday, Saturday, and if we lost, Sunday was a write-off. And my poor kids. Like, so now I've been able to change my mindset around that. And so, yeah, I can speak to younger coach Dani, and I can also speak to younger player Dani, that, there's life will go on, and that's where there's opportunity for growth when you do fail, to just keep working and find a different way.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because you're totally right. You do need to be able to deal with it and be more positive and kind of react. But then it's also like that drive, that hunger, that desire, it's kind of gotten you to where you are today. So it's kind of like a catch-22, like, what's the right answer? But it's probably both. It's probably both.
It probably is, and I think I'm going to be thrown into. I'm very interested to